Welcome back to the No One Tells You This podcast, the show where we say out loud things that most organizations never put inside the training manual. My guest today has spent his career living inside the tension that I talk about constantly, the tension between getting results and actually building people. He's a commercial leader and a sales leadership consultant who has led international teams across Europe, Africa, Latin America, and is a fractional CRO for several Swiss companies. What makes this conversation really interesting to me today is that Luca doesn't just talk about leadership in theory. He's someone that's made a deliberate shift from being a top individual contributor to asking a harder question. What does it actually take to build an independent, high-performing people rather than just being the person who carries the numbers? That shift from doing the work to building the people who do the work is the heart of everything that we'll explore in the show today. So Luca, welcome. I'm glad you're here.
Pleasure to be here.
Before we get into it, I want to give you a chance to set the stage. The people listening are early professionals, they're managers, they're leaders at all different points in their career. In a few sentences, what's your vantage point? Where are you sitting now? And why does this conversation matter to you?
I would say that the reason why this conversation matters to me is because nowadays, we're going through so much change in terms of the work environment, so much pressure. Right now, we see companies that promote people into leader positions, right? And back in the day, you would have startups and companies in general with so much money to fail and, move forward from failing. And right now, leaders don't have that luxury anymore, right? So they need to really get into the job and deliver as soon as possible. And what happens is that they often get promoted and they expect things to be easy because they were excelling as individual contributors, but they realize that it's a completely different job, right? And the skill set they have spent years mastering, now it's not useless, but almost useless because managing people is not like working by yourself, right? So as an individual contributor, that's why it matters to me. What I do in my everyday business is actually coaching founders, coaching sales leaders to actually embrace the leadership role, not only from a skill set for sales, but also from a leadership skill set. And that's why it matters. I want people to really be able to build an environment where people can succeed and grow businesses and people all together.
You touch on something really important that I could resonate with because I too have grown up in the sales environment, and success and your performance are very much tied to the metrics. You either sell or you don't. So
absolutely.
How has that been for you in terms of those that you coach and yourself personally, from looking at those really solid metrics to something a little bit more vague?
Dollars question, because that's exactly the main problem. Especially as you mentioned, as a salesperson, you know that you can put in as much effort, right? And then you can expect as many results, right? Of course, it's not always one-to-one. We know we have conversion rates, we have, win rates, but at least you can play numbers. You know that if you have a 10% conversion rate out of 100 outreaches, you're going to have 10 people talking to you, give or take, right? As a leader, you don't have that 1-on-1 ratio, right? You don't have anything like that.
Right.
You have people and you can only manage people so that they can give out that output and put in that input to get that output for the company, right? And I feel like that's really one of the first challenges that young leaders face, because they get sent into a leadership position. They're expected to do as many things as they were doing in the past and get as many results. And now it's completely different because not only you have to teach people how to work in the job, but then you have to manage different personalities, different ways of, expecting things, different ways of communicating, right? And that is exponentially harder if you are also managing multicultural team, because you have people across the globe and they have different ways of communicating to you. Some people are more transparent and direct. Other people need a bit more of a hand-holding or other ways of communicating the same thing, right? So I feel like that skill has to compound over the years. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck in a place where you manage people, meaning you just look at activity levels, you look at calls levels in general, but you don't understand what are the small things, small levers that you can really move around to make people perform, right? With some personalities can be something, with other personalities can be something else. And in sales, this is extremely crucial because you have, and I'm sure you know this, in sales, you have so many different personalities, right? You have the lone wolf that goes out there and they take care of their own opportunities, but then you have the a people pleaser. They want to make sure that everything is perfect with their relationship. So also that is something that you need to be careful when you hire salespeople, when you manage salespeople, and overall when you build a team.
Yeah, I love that. And I'd like for you to share a little bit more about your background as well as, how you got into what you're doing now. And I also find you particularly interesting because you are Italian, right?
Yep.
And, live in a place that I think that many people in the world envy to be around. But what I think is most amazing is that being in Europe, you touch so many different cultures. You can go a few miles or a few kilometers and it's a different cultures. I love to hear more about your background and kind of how you navigate that world.
For sure. I mean, I feel like I'm one of those crazy people that always wanted to work in sales, right? Because sometimes people end up in sales, but I always wanted to be a salesperson. And that's what I did. I have an IT background, but then my IT background helped me get into IT sales, right? So tech sales in that word. But basically I did it all. I started in a call center, cold calling people. Then I moved to sales executive, handling the whole sales cycle until I reached the director level. And even on a leadership level, right? Director level, I started small from Italy, but then I took over more regions throughout Europe. And at the end of my, let's say, employment career, because then I'm now working for myself, but until I was an employee, I was managing, a team spread across all over Europe. I had Italy, I had France, I had Spain, I had the UK, Belgium, Luxembourg, the Netherlands. So I had people all over Europe, right? Except the DACH region. And that was really a challenge, both from an hiring perspective, because we had to hire so many professionals and it's really a bureaucratic thing as well. So it's really tough to navigate all of that. But most importantly, on a cultural level, right? Because there are so many differences throughout the different regions and you need to understand, you need to be able to manage people that have different ways of expressing themselves, as I've said earlier, right? So that is what made me really fall into leadership, as in I love this because it's not straightforward at all, right?
Yeah.
But it's a constant learning. And I feel like the reason why I was able to be successful in that role is because I base everything on trust. So every time I build a team, I want the main pillar to be trust. Trust as in, if you are in my team, you have 1000% of my trust. And I know you're going to be working for the team in the sense that you want the team to be successful before else. That made the whole culture and the whole environment around my team safe, psychologically safe as well. Even when I was doing something that was culturally wrong, because of course I'm also human, right? I don't know I can every single culture throughout the world. When I was doing something that was culturally wrong from my team, they would be the first ones to raise their hand and be like, hey, Luca, that thing specifically made me feel that way. Right. And that was my learning part, because I always say, even throughout the hiring process, right? I always say, yes, I'm going to be your manager. So you're going to be reporting to me, but I'm not going to be above you in terms of, anything else. Like that's the only thing where I'm above you, reporting line. Everything else, we are in it together. We are learning together. So please, 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 I'm learning with you and from you, and you're learning from me as well, right? So if you see that I'm doing something wrong or you have a different opinion, please say that, because that's important. Right.
Yeah, that's an amazing leadership quality that you have. And, based on since you started implementing that, what are the changes that you've seen in terms of the teams that you built and their output and their success?
So that's a very good question, because there is a specific team, which was the Swiss one, because I took that over. I didn't hire those people, I took over, right? And there I can really highlight in my career the changes that happened in the team, right? So I was leading the French and Italian part of Switzerland, so Ticino and Romandy, right? And they were already established and they were performing at 10 level. When I took them over at first, there was a lot of mistrust. You were not my manager, now you are. I'm used to working that way, so I'm not going to be forthcoming all the way, like all the time. And there's always a bit of resistance, and that's normal. Last one in the block. And they're going to be like, okay, who are you? Why are you here? Why are you telling me what? So it takes a bit longer to establish trust. And you do that by believing the team and really showing that you're not there to actually impose on anything. You can propose, provide support. But I feel like the first step should be not coming into the room and changing everything. And we're going to do it this way, my way. It's actually the opposite, right? But what happened is slowly I could see the change, because the people in the team started trusting me. And when in the past, maybe a month before, it was like, oh, I'm doing this. Then after a month, it would be like, oh, I'm doing this, but here's where I'm getting stuck. Here's they felt safe in sharing the struggles. which of course, if you're not feeling safe, you feel like, okay, if I'm sharing where I'm struggling, my manager is going to be thinking I'm not good enough. That's actually
Right.
the opposite, right? If
Right.
I don't see struggles, I'm asking what's going on. Because if you're not struggling with something, then you're not being challenged enough,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So,
That's a really good point.
so I was, I know that something clicked. I knew something clicked because I started seeing those kind of behaviors, right? And then my
Mm-hmm.
next level has been, okay, now you're telling me you're struggling. Now the next time you come to me, I want to see what's your idea on solving that problem, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
want you to come to me like telling me where you're struggling, but I don't want to give you solutions. I want to hear your solutions, right?
Right. Right.
So
I wanna go into that piece of trust a little bit more, and I love that you set the environment for that with your teams. As an employee or contributor on your team, how can they build trust with you, right? Because trust is two-sided.
100%.
So, talk to me a little bit about that.
So, as I mentioned earlier, I feel like if they are part of my team, they always have my trust. Even if
Mhm.
I didn't hire them, generally, if I
Right.
hired them, of course, they went through a whole hiring process. I had time to vet them and so on. But even if I didn't hire them directly, intrinsically, I need to trust my team because otherwise I feel
Mhm.
like, why are we working together if I don't trust you?
Right.
But I feel like that's a difficult thing to do if you have a big ego, trusting other people because your ego comes first. You think
Right.
you know better. You think your skills are better than the others, which is, I feel like, the worst quality you could have as a leader, having a big ego, right? But other than that, like, to build trust is really showing consistently that you walk the talk, right?
Mhm.
So I trust you. And if you tell me I'm going to do this by that date, I expect that you come back saying, I
Right.
did it, right? And that is not something you can do in one day. It's like you do it over months, over years, right? And I'm okay if you say, hey, I did it, but here's what went wrong. Here's where I got stuck. That's fine, right? But if you walk the talk, then you have my trust, right? Same
Mhm.
thing as in if I know, because at the end of the day, as a leader, I need to know what's happening in my team, right? So if you tell me something and then I find out that it's not what you told me, but it's something else, that's also how you lose my
Yeah.
trust. So I would say rather than building trust is avoiding to lose that trust because once
Yeah.
it's gone, it's gone.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that consistency really matters too, as far as your execution and your ability to be dependable on things that is being asked of and transparent on that. So I love
100%.
that.
Also, because if I'm your leader, that showing up every time and being consistent, I will also show that. Like I will also
Right.
be consistent. So you can know for sure, you will know for sure that whenever I can, I will be there for you. That means
Yeah.
talking about your career, talking about you, talking about where do you want to go next? How much money would you like to earn in 5 years? Whatever is the thing that you care about, as long as I know what that thing is, I'll be there for you. So I need you as an individual contributor to contribute to the team. But as your leader,
Mhm.
it's my
Right.
responsibility to have vision of where you want to go and help you get there. And honestly, as a leader, I feel like
Right.
my biggest success is having people going above me, right? So learning from me and surpassing me and getting new roles and creating new leaders.
Right, right. Yeah, that's fantastic. I want to switch gears a little bit. And there's going to be a lot of people listening to this that are currently in individual contributor roles and looking to be on the path to go into management and leadership. What sort of mistakes do you see typically being made by those that come in with their first few months to a year of taking over a leadership position?
Right. For sure, there are many mistakes, and I feel like they're physiological. Right? You get into a new role and you think you're doing something that is right, but then it's not right, and that's part of the
Yeah.
game, right? But I feel like one of the biggest mistakes is really, other than what I mentioned earlier of not knowing how to handle the different personalities and all of that, is really understanding the power of letting people decide what's right for in that specific moment. Again, your role as a leader is not creating the perfect environment for every person in your team to always
Right.
know everything, right? And know everything, how to do everything. Actually, it should be the opposite. If someone in your team is cruising through the day with no challenges, cruising through the week, the month, the year with no challenges, you're failing as a leader because you're not giving them enough space to grow and to really think
Mhm.
strategically on What am I doing wrong? How can I solve this? You're not pushing their boundaries. So they're not growing. They're becoming, they've reached a plateau and they're stuck there. And this is why I see many, like, as I told you, I'm coaching founders. I'm also helping sales leaders in better, growing their teams and their company. And what I see is that often leaders act safeguard or safe net. So basically what happens is they have the individual contributors, right, running to them when they have a challenge because they know the leader is going to solve that challenge.
Yes.
As a leader, no, your role is not having all the answers. Your role is actually sit there and ask them, okay, and how would you solve this? And then if you think that thing specifically won't work, then ask the logic behind it. Don't just fudge that and say, oh, I would do it that way. Nobody cares how you would do it. They have to do it. Your role is to make them independent and challenge them constantly, right? So ask them more, like ask them questions like, okay, why would you like to do it that way specifically? What's the outcome do you think you're gonna get? What do you expect out of it?
I think that's a struggle in the sales environment specifically. And I would say any company that's probably moving fast, right? That they want to see results. And sometimes that means that leaders take things into their own hands. And I agree with you. I think it's a missed opportunity to be able to grow your team.
100%. Because the idea is really, because it's so easy to jump, especially in sales, as you mentioned, right? It's so easy to jump back in the old habits and be like, oh, I used to do this all the time. Let me jump in and I'm going to save the day and solve the problem, right? But that's not how you should do it. Otherwise, your people will never learn how to learn those skills that they need to actually move and progress in their own career and make the team successful, right? And your role is to multiply your expertise among the team and make them better than you are, because you're going to have so many experts and talents in your team that they're going to be better than you are, because they're going to be directly on the field, exposed every day, and you're not going to be that exposed anymore. So there will be a time where, like, I remember this thing specifically that I had the very first, like, my first team was like myself and one person, right? And this person then along the years became my deputy. And we reached a moment where she knew exactly every time what I would say. Every time. Like before I said it, she would know what was going to come out of my mouth. And that's the kind of expertise you want to building people that have your knowledge, but they surpass you in terms of they already know everything and they're exposed to the market and they can be better than you are.
All right. So I want to ask you a question related to that transition from being an individual contributor and suddenly going within the management or leadership role. What are things that you need to unlearn? Because, as an individual contributor, you're expected to follow through on more of task-related activities in a lot of capacities. How do you transition that to or learn things that you've been doing for so long?
Yeah, and I agree. First, let me say that I agree with you. Like as an individual contributor, especially in sales, you spent years mastering skills of being fast, knowing, jumping into the fray, and being able to handle as many tasks as possible in the shortest amount of time, running behind leads, after leads, working on opportunities, really being all over the place and making sure that everything is working fine and smoothly, right? And as a leader, it's actually the opposite, right? I used to definitely unlearn I'm going to jump head in and first into problems, into challenges, and then figure it out along the way. It's actually the opposite, because you have team members relying on you. So you have to step back, right? And really think. And sometimes, I was one of those people that thought the more the busier I was, the more effective I was as a leader. And that's completely wrong, right? As a leader, sometimes the most productive moments that I had was when I was like, my head is a mess right now. I'm going to close my laptop and take a walk. And maybe taking a walk without all the sales dashboards clouding my judgment, I would find solutions for my team. I would find ways forward. While my first year or two as a leader, I was like always looking at Salesforce, maybe, right? With all the sales dashboards. I was like, oh, how can I solve this? And I was looking at numbers and blah, 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 when maybe the problem was not even the numbers, right? I was trying to figure things out, right? Because I was so stuck on an individual contributor way of doing things, right? This is my pipeline. These are my numbers. I need to improve my numbers. And if I improve conversions right here, then I'm going to be better there, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's interesting because as a leader, you can't freak out is the best way to say it, right?
100%.
Even if you are, sometimes you have to go for a walk, think it over, because now there's more people affected by your decisions. It's not just you.
Exactly. And, you also have to show consistency, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
if you start, if people in your team see that you are also freaking out and you're also scared and you're also like, of course, you're human and it's normal to feel those emotions. But at a certain point, people look up to you in your team, right? And if they're
Mm-hmm.
freaking out and you're freaking out, then you work as
Rough. Yeah.
everything, yeah, everything goes bust. It's like, oh my God, everyone is going to die, which is not true. Right? And
Yeah.
part of your expertise as a leader is also being able to filter those emotions. I'm not saying don't live through those emotions. You should live through those emotions. Don't bottle them up. There is a time for that. But when you are with the team, you should be the one that says, okay, we're going to find solutions and move forward. Let's take some
Mm-hmm.
time and figure these things out. Because if you
Yeah.
freak out, then, you're just with them screaming.
Yeah. And I think that's also an art to what you were kind of getting at there. There is a level of vulnerability that's important to disclose, right? But there's a balance between not being overly reactive and emotionally heightened in every situation,
Yes.
which I'm very guilty of. Frankly, I have where all of my emotions, and oftentimes I need to pull that back in
Yeah.
terms of what I do with my team. So, what do you think of that balance?
I feel like that, yes, can be something we are both guilty of, by the way, but it can also be what makes us great leader, what makes us, us as leader. It's our
Yeah.
specific thing, right? Because I feel like people I worked with loved working with me. I hope so. Or at least usually I got positive, positive
Yeah.
feedbacks from them. But in general, because I was not faking it, as in if I was pissed, they would understand. Although I would not be freaking out, they could tell it. You could see it on my face, right? Same thing as they could see that I was not faking my emotions towards them. Like, hey, I'm really proud of you. I'm really, happy of what you're accomplishing and where you're going.
Mm-hmm.
And they could see that I cared about them, genuinely cared about them.
Mm-hmm.
And those emotions, I feel like it's important that yes, you find a balance, right? Because you're at work, you cannot always overly share. And there needs to be a balance and boundaries there, right?
Mm-hmm.
By the end of the day, we're also all human and we're working with people, right? So it's important that you care about your team and you genuinely care about your team. They're not just a
Mm-hmm.
number or just someone that can bring you results. And those emotions, I feel like it's okay if you let them out, especially because I'm used that my structure as a leader on a daily basis was not daily basis, sorry, on a weekly basis was always having my one-on-ones, right? I really cared about my
Right.
one-on-ones. And my one and only point throughout the one-on-ones was before talking business was, how are you? People that didn't know me were like, yeah, I'm fine. How are you? I was like, yeah, fine as well. But how are you really? Tell
Right.
me, how was your week? How's like your life in general? I want to know if you're mentally and emotionally fine and stable. Because if you're not, I prefer to invest the whole hour talking about, of course, share whatever you want to share. You don't have to overshare. But I'm here to support you because numbers won't come in if you're not mentally like there to actually be productive. So that genuine care, I feel like helps building that trust I mentioned before.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's so important. And I don't know if you've had this experience, but I've worked with people that have a very, I wouldn't say the best management style. People end up leaving the company and they have no idea why. Oftentimes, from just my consulting perspective, they have stuff going on at home. They have other things that, frankly, that leader had no idea about. So I agree with you. Like that pause to say, how are you mentally is so important. And people skip that part too often.
Yes, and I feel like the bigger the company gets, the less weight we give to people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a shame because nowadays you can see it actually. Startups have values on their walls and corporate companies have HR programs to make sure that people are valued. But at the end of
Mm-hmm.
the day, if you don't have leaders that care, all that stuff is useless because in startups are just words on a wall, right? And in corporate companies are just HR programs that nobody cares about. Because if
Mm-hmm.
my leader is creating a toxic environment and I clearly can see that he or she doesn't care about me at all, why do we have words on a wall or HR programs if my leader, the person that should care about my success, should care about my career and should care about how I'm doing,
Right.
doesn't care?
Doesn't care. Yeah. Personal interest in your employees is so important.
Yes. And that's also one of the reasons why I do what I do, right? It cannot be that your work life is so much dependent on the kind of leader that you have. Like
Mm-hmm.
in the same company, you could have two different ways of living leading the company based on the leader that you have. And that cannot be. It's just not fair, because if Laura is a great leader and I love working in company ABC because Laura is a great leader to me, but maybe then I have Luca under another person, or Luca is a leader that is not a good leader.
Right.
And then the people under me are living a nightmare. But we are still in company ABC. How can that be? And we all have in this company the HR project that talks about equality and talks about that and talks about that. But then in the nitty gritty, in the day by day, if your leader is not, walking the talk, there's not much that you can do about it.
Right.
Because you cannot go to your leader and be like, hey, I hate the way you manage me. But there should be that safety. There should be the safety of, going to Luca and be like, Luca, I really don't like the way you manage me. And I remember, I actually have an example here. I remember one day, it was one of my first years as a leader. Person in my team, actually, we were having a conversation about sales, of course. And I don't remember what I said exactly, but I remember then she came back to me saying, hey, Luca, when you said that thing specifically, made me feel bad, made me feel not appreciated. And made me feel like you didn't see the efforts that I put in to actually get there. And in sales, it's so easy, right? Because maybe people are putting in so much effort, but the results are not there to show for that effort. And again, I don't remember what I said, but it must have been something like that, right? That person was really working hard, and I might have said something like, hey, you're not doing anything, or something like that, right? And that person, with something that, just a few words, I was able to hit that person, and I was failing as a leader for that person, right? And it was a learning moment for me. And she came back and was like, hey, that really hurt me. That really made me feel like I'm not really being valued here.
Yeah.
That's why this trust is important, because then I could apologize and I could explain that wasn't my point. I knew that person was working day and night to get where we needed to be. It's just that I was also frustrated and feeling the pressure of delivering.
Yeah. At the end of the day, we're all humans, right?
100%.
And, I would say that in the larger companies you get to, that human piece, titles and egos and prestige and
politics.
Yeah. And politics too. Yeah. No, all of that is so spot on. So tell me a little bit more about you now, how you're really making an impact with founders and leaders, how folks can find you and engage with you.
So the way I'm doing it is really, so basically what I'm doing is working with companies on an advisory level, right? So I take companies that are founder led and they want to build their first teams, especially around sales and commercial teams, right? And I help them first hire the right talents. So finding, sales talents throughout Europe, but most importantly, building the infrastructure. So the operational sales operations structure that they need to make that team perform. Immediately after, I help them and coach them in a way that they can really manage a team in a productive way. Because I see that, especially now, startups are built by extremely technical founders and they don't have commercial know-how. And sometimes they don't even have human relations know-how, like as in they don't know how to really engage with people. And the point is, you cannot have a sales team that is under pressure 24/7, or is not delivering, is not really working in a good way, let's say. So what I'm doing is really trying to coach both founders or established teams, but that they have a VP sales or sales leader in taking the next step into the way that they manage people, right? Because you can have sales teams that operate in a positive way, still performing without having to create a toxic environment. So what I do is I go either into small startups or in bigger corporates where the team is already there, and I try to create that environment, both from an operational point of view, which brings in the numbers, right, for the performance part. So HubSpot, Salesforce, whatever that is, that you need to actually make sure that you track everything and you are on the right direction. But at the same time, I also try to focus on the soft skills and human element for the leader, right? So I coach the leader in a way that he or she can really take the team forward into the next level, and not just, I would say that the best way to describe it is I try to turn managers into leaders, right? So they don't just look at numbers and dashboards, but they lead the team and they create environments where the team can look up to them and feel inspired, feel energized, and not just, dying inside.
Yeah, that's so incredibly important. And I know for myself, in terms of my own business journey now of my next business that I'm building, I am spending a lot more dollars on my own personal development in terms of that. And I think as a founder of a company, as a startup, what you're saying as far as the culture that you set at the beginning is so incredibly important. And oftentimes people do that after, but that needs to be the core principle of what you're building. Your
100%.
product and the company culture that you're building should be going hand in hand. So I love what you're doing, and I think that there's so many people that really need to consider this at the beginning of them establishing a company.
And hopefully, I'm not saying that all companies should work with me, but hopefully as many companies as possible realize that how important that is, right? And take action. Because now I don't have the number out of the top of my mind, but there is a huge impact, especially in corporate companies, around psychological safety and mental wellness, right? Which is like the numbers. I read a research a couple of weeks back, but the numbers are staggering. Like they are way bigger than, physical health in companies. And we have so many projects around, making people active and making sure that people are active within the company, they are healthy. But often companies don't really think about the psychological health of the people working in their company, right? Which is also important.
Yeah, that's so important. And I think just one of those things that people put it on the back end of building their business and they worry why they're not growing. So, if my biggest takeaway is this is something that founders and businesses need to establish early in their journey. And on top of that, no matter where you are, coaching is a really good thing. And I'm learning now that I want a coach for every part of my life as I grow my business, because there's always someone that could help me think differently and improve what I'm doing.
100%. And just to kind of highlight what you and I do, right? I always say that coaches are to people what consultants are to companies, right? So companies should have consultants consulting on specific topics to make that company better. And people should have coaches throughout different aspects of their life to make sure that they can really be successful in whatever endeavor they're doing, right? So fitness, finance, sales, whatever that is, right? Career. But you need people showing you the ropes and showing you where you should go and giving you advice on how to tackle certain challenges.
Well, Luca, I absolutely love what you're doing. And as we close up, I ask every guest this one question.
So the thing that nobody told me when I was becoming a leader was that I should not have all the answers. But once I figured out that, my role is, again, not having all the answers, but creating the right context for everyone in my team to try things out, to bring up solutions. And if they failed fast and forwards. Once I figured that out, it was just a game changer. I could clearly see my team take off. It was day and night. My day by day became another job entirely. So that made my professional career and leadership completely different.
Well, thank you so much for your time. We'll include everything within the show notes. You're fantastic, and I hope to see you in Milan soon.
Absolutely. We will meet up. Thank you, Laura.
All right. Thank you so much.